The forest at the border wasn't supposed to be quiet. That was the first thing Garrett Thorne noticed. The kind of silence that happens when nature holds its breath, waiting for violence to pass, waiting for death to move on. He'd been a soldier for 6 years, long enough to know what quiet forest meant. Blood had already been spilled nearby. Something had happened here, something that made even the crickets stop singing. Garrett's hand went to his sword, not drawing it, just touching the familiar leather grip. A soldier's comfort in uncomfortable places. The moon was high, nearly full. Good for seeing, bad for hiding. He moved through the underbrush with practiced silence, each step placed carefully, each breath measured. The training had become instinct years ago. Move quiet, stay alert, survive the night. That's when he saw her, 20 feet up in an ancient oak, wedged between branches like some kind of exhausted cat that had climbed too high and simply given up on the way down. An orc, alone, sleeping. Every single part of his training screamed at him to sound the alarm. Protocol was clear. Orcs in neutral territory meant scouts. Scouts meant war parties weren't far behind. Captain Aldrich Rowan had spent 3 hours last week explaining in excessive detail what happened to soldiers who hesitated when encountering enemy combatants. But Garrett hesitated anyway, because the orc in the tree wasn't scouting. She was barely conscious. Her armor, if you could call it that, was more scars than metal. Dark leather straps held together pieces that looked salvaged from 3 different sets. None of them originally hers. One shoulder guard was missing entirely. Her left arm hung at an angle that made Garrett's own shoulder ache just looking at it. And she was small. Well, small for an orc, about his height, which meant she'd have trouble in hand-to-hand combat with most orc warriors. The kind of size difference that made you wonder how she'd survived this long, how she'd made it to this tree, to this moment, to whatever had broken her enough to fall asleep in enemy territory. Garrett stood at the base of the tree for exactly 47 seconds, counting his own heartbeats, trying to decide if he was about to make the worst decision of his military career, or just a really, really stupid one. Then she whimpered in her sleep. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong to monsters, the kind of sound his sister Isolde made when she had nightmares about their father's funeral. Small, broken, human. Except she wasn't human, she was orc. Green skin, tusks, the works, the enemy, the savage, the monster who was currently curled up in a tree like a child afraid of the dark. Garrett looked up at her one more time. Really looked. Past the green skin, past the tusks, past everything he'd been taught to see. He saw someone who was exhausted, someone who had run out of running, someone who had climbed as high as she could and then simply stopped because there was nowhere left to go. This is incredibly stupid, Garrett muttered to himself. But he didn't sound the alarm. He didn't draw his sword. He sat down at the base of the tree, positioned his back against the rough bark, and began what would become the longest night of his life. The first hour passed in that particular kind of alertness that comes from knowing you're doing something phenomenally against regulations. Every snap of a twig sent his hand to his sword hilt. Every rustle of leaves made him calculate exactly how fast he could climb the tree if something came for her. Came for her, not came for them. He was already thinking of her safety as separate from his own, which was its own kind of problem. Garrett had been raised in a military family. His father had been a captain before the fever took him. His oldest brother was a lieutenant stationed up north. Even Isolde, who collected rocks and believed in fairy tales, could recite the Articles of War from memory, and Article 7 was very, very clear about aiding enemy combatants. But Article 7 had never met an exhausted orc who cried in her sleep. It started softly, so soft that Garrett almost convinced himself he was imagining it. A hitching breath, a shudder that ran through her entire body, then a sound that was unmistakably a sob, muffled, desperate. The sound of someone who had forgotten how to stop crying. She didn't wake up. The tears just came, silent and steady, running down green cheeks and dripping onto the branch beneath her. Garrett looked away. It felt wrong to watch, like seeing someone undressed without permission. Private grief wasn't meant to be witnessed, especially not by an enemy soldier sitting guard below. But he couldn't unhear it, and he couldn't ignore the way she whispered names in her sleep. Orcish names that rolled like thunder and broke like glass. Names that sounded like prayers, or accusations, or goodbyes that came too late. One name repeated more than others. Drovik. She said it the way Isolde said their mother's name in her sleep, with longing, with loss, with a particular pain of being the one left behind. Garrett shifted his position, trying to get comfortable against the tree, trying not to think about what those names meant, who they belonged to, how many of them were still alive. Something fell from above, a small object, catching moonlight as it tumbled. Landing in the dirt beside his boot, Garrett picked it up carefully. A stone, black, polished smooth from years of handling, with veins of gold running through it like frozen lightning. It was warm, not from the fall, from body heat. This stone had been carried against skin for a very long time. The leather cord that had held it was still attached, snapped clean through, worn thin from years of wear. Garrett turned the stone over in his palm. It was beautiful in a severe kind of way, the kind of object that mattered. That meant something. That held weight beyond its physical presence. He should have pocketed it, kept it as evidence, proof of enemy presence in neutral territory. Instead, he wrapped it carefully in a clean cloth from his pack. Set it aside, treating it with the reverence it seemed to demand. The second hour was when the memory started to hit him. Garrett tried to keep his mind on the present, on watching the perimeter, on listening for threats, on being the soldier Captain Rowan had trained him to be. But his mind kept wandering back to 3 years ago, to the Battle of Crow's Ridge, to the moment everything he'd been taught about orcs had begun to crack. They'd called it a glorious victory. King's forces had pushed back an orc war party, defended the village, saved countless lives. Garrett had been 18, fresh from training, eager to prove himself. He remembered the celebration afterward, the way Captain Rowan had raised a toast, the way veteran soldiers clapped them on the back and called them heroes. He also remembered the orc bodies they'd left on the field, the way one of them no older than Garrett himself had died calling for his mother. In perfect common tongue, not orcish. "Mama," he'd said. "Mama, it hurts." Garrett had thrown up behind a supply wagon after that. Nobody noticed. Everyone was too busy celebrating. Captain Rowan had found him later, offered him a flask of something strong. "First battle's always rough," Rowan had said. "Not unkindly. Gets easier." It hadn't gotten easier. Garrett had just gotten better at not thinking about it. Now sitting beneath a tree guarding an enemy soldier who cried in her sleep, all those thoughts came rushing back. The orc at Crow's Ridge who'd called for his mother, the ones who'd fled not fought when they realized they were outnumbered, the body of an orc woman they'd found with a child's toy clutched in her hand, a carved wooden horse, the kind human children played with, the kind that suggested she'd had a child somewhere, had been someone's mother. Monsters didn't have mothers. Monsters didn't carry their children's toys into battle. But people did. "What am I doing?" Garrett whispered to the darkness. The forest didn't answer. It rarely did. The third hour was when he started talking to her. Quietly, barely above a whisper, knowing she couldn't hear him but needing to fill the silence anyway. "My sister collects stones," he said, looking up at the branch where she slept. "Isolde, she's 19, believes every rock has a story, drives our mother insane because she brings home buckets of them. Says they absorb memories, that if you hold one long enough, you can feel the history of everyone who's touched it." He pulled the black stone from where he'd wrapped it, held it up to catch the moonlight. "I wonder what stories this one would tell. I wonder who gave it to you. If they're one of the names you keep saying in your sleep." The orc Cora, though he didn't know her name yet, shifted slightly. Her hand moved, unconsciously reaching for her throat where the stone should have been. When her fingers found nothing, she made a small sound of distress. Garrett stood, moved closer to the tree, not climbing it. That would be too much, too invasive, but close enough that he could see her face properly in the moonlight. She was young, younger than he'd initially thought. Maybe his age, maybe younger. Hard to tell with orcs. But her face had that particular unfinished quality that youth carried. like she hadn't quite grown into her tusks yet, hadn't quite settled into who she was supposed to become. Her armor was telling its own story. The mismatched pieces, the emergency repairs done with whatever materials were available, the way certain spots were worn smooth from constant adjustment, suggesting they didn't fit quite right. This was salvage armor, the armor of someone who couldn't afford proper equipment, of someone who'd had to make do with what dead warriors left behind. But there was one piece that clearly was hers, a small iron pin fastened to her chest piece, shaped like a stone surrounded by flames. A clan symbol. Garrett had seen similar markers before, always after battles, always on dead orcs. The Bloodstone clan, which meant she was a long way from home. The Bloodstone territories were 3 days' march north, deep in the mountains. "What are you doing out here alone?" Garrett asked softly. "Where's your war party, your clan?" She didn't answer. Of course she didn't answer, but Garrett found himself imagining responses anyway. Found himself creating a story around this lone orc warrior sleeping in a tree at the border of neutral territory, crying in her sleep, carrying a stone that mattered enough to break her heart when she realized it was gone. Maybe she was an outcast. Maybe she'd been exiled for some crime, real or imagined. Maybe she'd fled. Maybe she was running from something worse than human soldiers. Or maybe, and this thought settled in Garrett's chest like a stone, maybe she'd lost everyone. Maybe those names she whispered in her sleep weren't goodbyes. They were the last survivors of her world, and she was trying to hold on to them the only way she could. The fourth hour brought danger. Garrett heard them before he saw them. Footsteps, multiple sets, human boots on forest floor. Patrol, his patrol, the squad that had split up to cover more ground. "Damn," Garrett breathed. He looked up at the sleeping orc, still unconscious, still vulnerable, still very, very illegal to be protecting. The voices grew closer. He recognized them. Sergeant Brennan, who told terrible jokes. Private Aldwin, who was only 17 and still got homesick. Corporal Dane, who never met a regulation he didn't love. If they found the orc, they'd kill her. Or worse, capture her, bring her back for interrogation, which was a polite word for torture. Garrett had seen what interrogations looked like, had heard the sounds that came from the holding cells. He had maybe 90 seconds to decide who he was. In the end, it wasn't really a decision at all. Garrett stepped away from the tree, moving to intercept the patrol before they got close enough to see what he was guarding. His hand went to his sword, not to draw it, just to rest there, the universal signal of a soldier on alert. "Thorn," Sergeant Brennan's voice carried through the darkness. "That's you present," Garrett called back, keeping his voice steady. "Sector clear." The patrol emerged from the tree line, 3 soldiers, tired from hours of walking, eager to finish their shift and get back to camp for something hot to eat. Brennan squinted at him. "You've been here the whole time, thought you were covering the eastern ridge." "Thought I heard something," Garrett lied smoothly. "Turned out to be a deer. Big one. Nearly gave me a heart attack." It was a good lie, believable? The kind of thing that happened on night patrol. Aldwin laughed. "Remember when that raccoon got into the supply tent? Sergeant Morris thought we were under attack. Nearly stabbed a bag of flour." "That raccoon had it coming," Brennan said. He looked at Garrett more closely. "You good look tense." "Long night," Garrett said, which wasn't almost a lie. "Looking forward to dawn." Corporal Dane, who loved regulations more than life itself, was studying the area with the intensity of someone who had read too many tactical manuals. His gaze swept over the tree line, over the underbrush, over the tree where an orc was sleeping 20 feet above them. Garrett's heart stopped, literally stopped for a moment, then restarted with enough force to make him dizzy. But Dane's eyes passed over the tree without pause. The branches were thick, the shadows deep, and nobody expected to find an enemy combatant sleeping in a tree like an exhausted cat. "Come on," Brennan said, already moving past. "Let's finish the circuit. I'm freezing my ass off, and Morris promised hot stew if we're back before dawn." They moved on. Garrett stood very, very still until their footsteps faded into nothing. Until the forest returned to its patient silence. Until his heart rate dropped below panic attack levels. Then he sat back down at the base of the tree and tried not to think about what he'd just done. Lying to fellow soldiers, hiding an enemy combatant, violating Article 7 and probably 16 other military regulations. For an orc he didn't know, who would probably kill him if she woke up and decided he was a threat. "I'm so incredibly stupid," Garrett whispered. But he didn't move, didn't leave, didn't do any of the sensible things a smart soldier would do. He stayed. The fifth hour, the hour just before dawn, was when everything changed. The sky was beginning that particular kind of pre-light that meant night was almost over. Not bright enough to see colors properly, but bright enough that the world stopped being a pure shadow and started becoming real again. Garrett heard her move before he saw it. A shift of weight, a sharp intake of breath, the sound of someone waking him up in a strange place. Disoriented, immediately at alert. He should have moved away, should have drawn his sword, should have done literally anything except what he actually did, which was sit very still and wait. She appeared at the edge of the branch, moving from horizontal to vertical with fluid grace, despite her injuries, despite having just woken up. She moved like water, like violence waiting for direction. Then she saw him. They froze, both of them, two creatures from opposite sides of an endless war, staring at each other in the pre-dawn light, trying to figure out if this was the moment they killed each other. Her hand went to her throat, to the empty space where her stone should have been. Her eyes, yellow gold in the growing light, went wide. Panicked, like he'd stolen something more valuable than her life. Garrett raised his hand slowly, not quite surrender, not quite greeting, somewhere in between. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. His voice sounded strange in the morning air, like he'd forgotten how to speak. Her hand stayed at her throat, searching, not finding. The panic in her eyes intensified. "This?" Garrett reached slowly for the wrapped stone beside him, held it up. "You dropped it. It's safe." Understanding hit him then, like cold water. She didn't understand, or she did understand, but didn't believe. Why would she? He was human. She was orc. The last thing she should expect was kindness. She began to move, not attacking, retreating, backing along the branch, calculating jump distance, preparing to run. "Wait," Garrett said. "Please wait." He unwrapped the stone, held it up so she could see it clearly. The black surface, the gold veins, the leather cord still attached. She stopped, her eyes fixed on the stone with an intensity that was almost physical. "Karak," she said. Her voice was rough, from sleep, from tears, from whatever she'd survived before finding this tree. But it was also clear, precise, speaking common tongue like someone who'd spent years learning it. "That's Karak's stone, father's stone." She spoke English, perfectly, with barely an accent. "Your father's?" Garrett asked. "Father's stone, father's honor, father's—" She struggled for the word. "Father's everything." She dropped from the branch, landed badly on her injured leg, nearly fell. Garrett moved without thinking, stepping forward to steady her. They both froze again, this time for different reasons. His hand was on her arm, green skin under his palm, warm, solid, real. Not monstrous, not savage, just a person. A person who was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "You—" She pulled back, slowly. "You guard me. All night, you guard enemy." "Yes," Garrett said simply, because what else was there to say? "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Heavy, impossible to answer, impossible not to answer. "I don't know," Garrett said. Which was true. "You were crying." Her expression did something complicated. Shame, anger, grief, all mixing together. "Crying is weak," she said. "Crying is human," Garrett said, then realizing his mistake. "Sorry, I meant—" "I understand." She looked down at her hand, touching her arm where he'd steadied her. "You think orc not feel, not cry, not hurt like human." "I used to think that," Garrett admitted. "I don't anymore." The silence that followed was different from all the silences before it. This one had weight, had possibility. "Your name," she asked. "Garrett." "Garrett." She tested that, made it sound like something from a different language. "I am Cora, Cora Ashenblade, daughter of Zorgath, healer of Bloodstone clan." She paused. Her grip tightened on her injured arm. Last of Bloodstone Clan. The word hung in the air like smoke. Last. Last, Garrett asked gently. War party. 3 days ago. She stopped, started again, her voice breaking on the edges. We lose everything. Brother Dravik says run, says survive, says honor means nothing if everyone dead to remember honor. Brother, so that's whose name she'd been crying. Well, is he, Garrett started, alive maybe, if God's kind, if luck holds. She looked at the sky, at the lightning horizon. I must go. Dawn comes. Your soldiers comes. This, she gestured between them, this not possible, cannot be possible. I know, Garrett said, but neither of them moved. The stone, Cora said. Please. Garrett held it out. She took it, and their fingers touched for just a moment, long enough for Garrett to feel that the stone was still warm, long enough for their eyes to meet. Thank you, Cora said, for guard, for Karak, for, she paused, for seeing Cora, not just Orc. Thank you, Garrett replied, for not killing me when you had the chance. She smiled. It wasn't much of a smile. Her tusks made the expression awkward, uncertain, but it was real. You guard enemy all night, Cora said. You very stupid human. Extremely stupid, Garrett agreed. Possibly the stupidest. I like stupid humans better than smart humans, Cora said. Smart humans kill. Stupid humans. She touched her chest, right above where her heart would be. Stupid humans feel. Then she turned to go, limped toward the tree line, favoring her injured leg. Garrett should have let her go, should have watched her disappear into the forest, should have gone back to camp and pretended this night had never happened. Instead, he said, 3 miles north, there's a cabin. Hidden. My sister Isolde and I used to play there as kids. It's safe. Hidden. If you need somewhere to. He trailed off. Cora had stopped walking. Didn't turn around, just stood there. Back straight despite her injuries, holding her father's stone against her chest. Why you tell me this? She asked. Because, Garrett said, stupid humans do stupid things. She did turn then, looked at him with those gold eyes that had seen too much death, too much loss. If I go to cave, if I wait, you come, it wasn't really a question. It was a possibility, a door opening, a choice that would change everything. Yes, Garrett said, I'll come. Why was? Because I spent all night watching you cry, and I think. He stopped, started again. I think maybe the war isn't as simple as they told us. I think maybe orcs and humans aren't as different as we're supposed to believe. And I think I want to know more about you, about your people, about why everything I've been taught feels like a lie. Cora was quiet for a long moment. Then, you break rules. You break honor. You break everything soldier should be. Yes, Garrett agreed. Good, Cora said. World need more broken soldiers, less perfect ones. She left then, disappearing into the trees like smoke, like she'd never been there at all. Garrett stood alone in the growing light, holding nothing but the memory of a conversation that shouldn't have been possible, of a night that would change everything. In the distance, he could hear his patrol returning, could hear Captain Rowan calling for morning assembly, could hear the familiar sounds of military life demanding his attention. But all he could think about was a cave 3 miles north, and an orc with gold eyes who taught him that enemies could be people, that monsters could cry, that everything he'd believed about the war was built on a foundation of convenient lies. The sun broke over the horizon. Garrett Thorne walked back to camp and began counting the hours until he could return to that cave, until he could see if she was really there, until he could find out if one stupid choice made in the darkness of a single night could somehow change the world, or at least change him. Cora found the cave on the second night, not because it was easy to find, but because when you've spent your entire life running through forests, hiding in shadows, surviving in places that weren't meant to shelter anyone, you developed an instinct for safe spaces. The cave was exactly as Garrett had described it, hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss and twisted roots, small enough that most adult warriors would miss it, large enough that she could stand upright inside without her head brushing stone. It smelled like earth and old rain and something else, something that made her think of childhood, of safety, of times before war had become the only language anyone spoke. Cora sat just inside the entrance, back against cold stone. Father's karak pressed against her chest, and for the first time in 72 hours she allowed herself to breathe without checking for threats. The tears came again, but different this time. Not the desperate broken sobs of the tree. These were quieter, older, the kind of tears that came from somewhere deeper than immediate pain. She cried for her father Zorgath, who had believed that words could build bridges, who had panted because he'd trusted the wrong human, who had given her this stone with its gold veins running through midnight black, and told her, Karak Mor Shada, memory gives strength. She cried for her clan, for the warriors who had stood beside her, for the children she had healed from fevers and broken bones, for the elders who had taught her which herbs stopped bleeding and which ones brought sleep without dreams. All gone. 72 hours ago they had been a family, a people, a future. Now she was the last one running. And her brother Dravik was somewhere in the mountains probably thinking she was dead, probably building something from the ashes with whoever else had survived. If anyone else had survived. Cora pulled her knees to her chest, made herself small, the way she used to when she was young and storms raged outside the clan's caves. Back when being small meant being protected. Before she'd learned that in this world being small just meant being an easier target. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the darkness. The cave didn't answer, but somewhere in the question she found something unexpected. Hope, because a human soldier had spent all night guarding her, had returned her father's stone, had offered her this sanctuary without asking for anything in return. Maybe, just maybe, her father's dream hadn't been completely foolish. Maybe bridges could be built, if you were stupid enough, or brave enough, or desperate enough to try. Garrett came on the third day. Cora heard him long before she saw him. Footsteps that tried to be quiet but weren't quite practiced enough. The rustle of a pack being adjusted. The small sounds humans made when they thought they were being stealthy. She could have killed him in that moment. Could have waited in the shadows by the entrance. Let him walk into the cave. Ended it quickly. Instead, she stepped into the light. He froze, hand halfway to his sword. Then slowly, deliberately, he moved his hand away, held both palms up, the same gesture he'd made at the tree. Not quite surrender, not quite greeting. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," he said. "I wasn't sure I would come," Cora replied. The truth hung between them. Honest, fragile. Garrett shifted his pack off his shoulders, set it down carefully. "I brought food, medical supplies, some other things I thought." He trailed off, looking uncertain. "I didn't know what you'd need." Cora stepped closer, studied him in full daylight for the first time. He was young, younger than she'd realized in the pre-dawn shadows. His face still had that unfinished quality. Like life hadn't quite carved all its lessons into his features yet. There was kindness in his eyes. The dangerous kind. The kind that made you want to trust, want to believe, want to forget that trust had gotten her father killed. "Why you do this?" she asked. "Why you risk everything?" Garrett was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, like he was discovering the words as he said them. 3 years ago at Crow's Ridge, I watched an orc die. He was young, maybe younger than me, and he called for his mother as he bled out, in perfect common tongue. Just, "Mama, it hurts." He looked at his hands. "I threw up after, behind a supply wagon. Nobody saw. Everyone was too busy celebrating our glorious victory." Cora's chest tightened. She knew that story. Different details. Same ending. How many times had her people celebrated victories built on someone else's dying words? "I've spent 3 years trying not to think about it," Garrett continued, "trying to be a good soldier, follow orders, do my duty. But then I found you in that tree, crying, holding onto that stone like it was the only thing keeping you alive. And I thought, what if that had been him? What if someone had found him before he died? Would they have helped, or would they have just finished it?" "Most would finish it," Cora said quietly, "on both sides." "I know." He met her eyes. "That's why I'm here. Because maybe it doesn't have to be that way." Cora studied him for a long moment, reading the lines of his face, the set of his shoulders, the way his hands stayed open. Non-threatening. Honest. She made a decision. Sit, she said. You bring medical supplies. I teach you orc medicine. Better than human medicine. Faster. Stronger. Something lit up in Garrett's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. I'd like that, he said. And so it began. Hashem. Week 1 was about learning to exist in the same space without flinching. Cora showed Garrett the herbs she'd gathered from the surrounding forest. Silverleaf for infections, bloodroot for clotting wounds, dream willow bark for pain that went deeper than physical. She taught him how to identify them by touch, by smell, by the way they grew in relation to other plants. The knowledge her father had taught her, that his mother had taught him. Knowledge passed down through generations of bloodstone healers. Garrett learned quickly. His hands were steady, careful, the hands of someone who understood that healing required as much precision as killing. Your people don't teach this, Cora asked, watching him carefully crush silverleaf into paste. We have healers, Garrett said, but mostly they just stitch wounds, give you something to dull the pain, send you back to fighting. He looked at the paste he'd made. This is different. This is about understanding why the body hurts. How to help it remember how to heal itself. Fathers say body knows how to live. We just help it remember. Your father was a healer too. Father was peacemaker, but yes, also healer. Cora touched the Karak stone. Father believed healing and peace are same thing. Fix what is broken. Stop what causes pain. Build instead of destroy. What happened to him? The question came soft, careful. Like Garrett knew he was stepping on sacred ground. Cora was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was flat, controlled. The way you had to speak when the pain was too big to carry any other way. Father trust wrong human. 10 years ago, make trade agreement. Promise of peace, human betray. Kill father, take everything. She looked at Garrett directly. This is why Cora people hate your people. Why Draviks say trust is weakness. Why clan fight instead of talk. Garrett's face did something complicated. Shame, anger, grief. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Why you sorry you not kill father? No, but my people did. And I've spent 6 years fighting for a cause that maybe isn't as righteous as they told us. They sat in silence after that, 2 people carrying the weight of sins they didn't commit but couldn't escape. Finally, Cora said, Father would like you. Father would say, this one asks questions. This one thinks. This one might understand. Do you think I understand? No. Cora shook her head. But you trying, that is more than most. Tim. Week 2 brought an unexpected complication. Cora was gathering herbs near the cave entrance when she heard it. Footsteps, lighter than Garrett's, quicker, and coming directly toward the cave with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She dropped into combat stance, hand going to the bone knife at her belt, ready to fight, ready to die, ready to make sure whoever found this place wouldn't live to tell others. A girl appeared through the moss curtain, human, young, maybe 19, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that held more curiosity than fear. They stared at each other. Cora's knife was out, raised, ready. The girl didn't run, didn't scream, just stood there looking at Cora with an expression that was almost wonder. You're the one Garrett's been visiting, she said. Her voice was calm, matter of fact, like finding an orc in a secret cave was a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon activity. Who are you? Cora demanded. Isolde, Garrett's sister. The girl took a step closer, not threatening, just curious. I followed him, been doing it for a week. Wanted to see what was so important he had risked court-martial. You tell soldiers. I die. Garrett die. I'm not going to tell anyone. Isolde's eyes dropped to the knife in Cora's hand, then to the Karak stone around her neck. Her expression shifted, softened. Is that, can I see it, the stone? Cora's grip tightened on the knife. Why turn him? Because I collect stones, have since I was little. And that one is, Isolde gestured carefully. That one is special. I can feel it from here. It has weight. It has story. Against every instinct, screaming at her to run, to fight, to do anything except trust another human, Cora found herself lowering the knife. There was something in this girl's voice, in the way she looked at the stone, not with greed, not with calculation, with reverence, the way someone looked at something sacred. Slowly, Cora lifted the karak from her chest, held it out, not close enough for Isolde to touch, but close enough to see. Isolde leaned forward. Her eyes went wide. "It's crying," she whispered. Cora's breath caught. "What? The stone. I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel it. It's holding so much sadness, so much love, like..." Isolde looked up at Cora. "Like it belonged to someone who loved you very much, and it misses them. It misses being held by them." Something broke in Cora's chest. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected a human, a stranger, to understand what she'd been carrying. What this stone meant. "Father's stone," Cora said, her voice cracking. "Father, give Cora before die. Say memory gives strength. Say remember who we are when world tries to make us forget." Isolde nodded. Like this made perfect sense. Like stones talking to her about memories and grief was just another part of her day. "My father died too," she said quietly. 5 years ago. Fever. I kept one of his buttons, from his uniform. It's not much, but sometimes when I hold it, I can almost..." She trailed off. "I can almost feel him still here." They looked at each other. Two girls who'd lost their fathers, who carried pieces of them like talismans, who understood that some griefs didn't have words in any language. Cora lowered herself to the ground, sat, the knife still in her hand but no longer raised. "Sit," she said. "Tell Cora about stones, about memories, about why you believe rocks have stories." Isolde sat, and for the first time since Cora had fled the burning remains of her clan, she felt something that wasn't fear or grief or rage. She felt the beginning of friendship. The first month transformed into the second without Cora quite noticing, when one ended and the other began. Days fell into a rhythm. Garrett would visit in the afternoons after his patrol duties, bring food, share news from the human camp, learn herb lore and orc medicine. Isolde would come in the mornings, bringing books, rocks she'd found, stories about the human world that Cora had never heard. They would sit at the cave entrance, and Isolde would teach Cora to read common tongue. It was harder than learning to speak it. Cora had learned spoken English from traders, from prisoners, from the necessity of survival. But reading was different. Reading was intimate. Reading meant understanding not just words, but the way they fit together to create meaning. "This word," Cora said, pointing to a page in one of Isolde's books. "What is belonging?" "Belonging," Isolde repeated. It's the feeling of being part of something, of having a place where you fit, where people want you there." Cora was quiet for a moment. Cora understand this word, but not feel it. Not since Clan gone. Isolde reached out, hesitated, then gently touched Cora's hand. "You belong here," she said, "with us, with Garrett and me. It's not the same as your clan, but it's something." Cora looked at their hands, green and pale, touching, not as enemies, not as warrior and victim, just as two people who had decided that maybe possibly there was another way. "Isolde is brave," Cora said. "Braver than warriors. Warriors only brave with weapons. Isolde brave with heart." "You're brave too," Isolde said. "You stayed, even though you could have run, even though trusting us could get you killed." Maybe Cora not brave, maybe just tired of running. Maybe being tired of running is its own kind of brave. They sat together watching clouds move across the sky. Two girls from opposite sides of a war that neither of them had started, building something fragile and precious in the space between. The letter came in the 7th week. Cora was alone in the cave grinding herbs for a poultice when she heard the familiar call of a messenger crow, the sharp, specific caw that meant message for Bloodstone. Her hands froze. She hadn't sent word to Dravik, hadn't known how, hadn't known if she should. Part of her had hoped that maybe if she stayed quiet long enough, she could just disappear into this new life, become someone who wasn't defined by clan or duty or the weight of being the last. But the crow wouldn't give up. It circled the area, calling again and again. Cora stepped outside, held up her arm. The crow landed, dropped a small leather tube. and flew away without waiting for a reply. She stood there for a long time, holding the tube, knowing that whatever was inside would demand a choice she wasn't ready to make. Finally, she opened it. The message was written in Orcish, in Dravik's careful blocky script, each letter precise, controlled. The handwriting of someone who had learned to write late in life and took it seriously. Little Sister Dravik has rebuilt. 37 survivors, mostly young, mostly scared. We have shelter in the old northern caves. Food is scarce but enough. We survive. Brother hears rumors, hears whispers of lone orc girl at the border, hears stories that sound like Cora. Brother knows you live, is grateful to ones, but gratitude is not enough. Clan needs you, needs your healing, needs your knowledge, needs your strength. Come home, Cora. Duty calls, father's memory calls. Those who die call. Your brother Dravik, chief of Bloodstone, Cora read it 3 times. Each time the words seemed to grow heavier, more impossible to carry. She sat at the cave entrance, holding the letter in one hand, her father's stone in the other. Duty. It was such a simple word, such a powerful word. In Orcish culture, duty was everything. You didn't question it, didn't refuse it. Duty to family, duty to clan. Duty to the dead who had given everything so you could live. Her father had raised her on duty. We heal because it is our duty, he would say. We protect the weak because it is our duty. We remember those who came before because it is our duty. But her father had also said something else, something she'd almost forgotten until this moment. Duty without choice is slavery. True honor comes from choosing your path even when the path is hard. Cora looked at the letter again, at her brother's careful words, at the weight of expectation pressed into every line. Then she looked at the cave around her, at the books Isolde had left, at the herb pouches Garrett had brought, at the space where she'd learned to breathe again, where she'd discovered that maybe the enemy had faces and names and fathers they'd lost too. She pulled out a piece of parchment, one of the blank ones Isolde had given her, started writing, slowly, carefully. Her common tongue letters awkward but legible. Dravik's sister is grateful you live. Grateful clan survives. Grateful that something remains of what we were. But Cora cannot come home. Not because Cora is coward. Not because Cora forgets duty or dishonors dead. Because Cora has found different duty, different honor. Brother says survive. Sister has survived. Now sister chooses to live, to build something new, to try what father tried and failed, to make bridge where there was only blood. Cora knows this sounds like betrayal, knows this brings shame. But father taught true honor is choosing your path when path is hard. This is sister's choice, sister's path, sister's honor. If you need healing knowledge, sister will send. If you need medicine, wisdom sister will teach. But sister cannot return to old way, cannot return to cycle of hate that killed father and everyone else. Maybe Cora is wrong. Maybe Cora will die for this choice. But maybe if sister is very lucky and very brave and very stupid, Cora will live for something more than war. Your sister, Cora Ashenblade, daughter of Zorgath the Peacemaker. She read it over twice. Each time her hand hesitated over the signature. Each time she almost crumpled the paper. Started over, wrote something different, something safer. But in the end, she folded it carefully, sealed it with wax from the candle stub Garrett had brought, and placed it where the next messenger crow could find it. Then she sat back down, held her father's stone, and wept. Not from grief this time, from fear, from hope, from the terrifying possibility that she had just chosen herself over everything she'd been raised to believe in, and that somehow impossibly that might be okay. Garrett found her like that an hour later, sitting at the cave entrance, face tear-streaked, letter waiting to be sent. He sat beside her without asking, just presence, just company. I wrote to my brother, Cora said finally. Tell him I'm not coming home. Garrett was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? Like I have betrayed everything. Like I am brave. Like I am coward. Like I am free. Like I am lost. She looked at him. How do you feel when you choose this? When you choose guard Cora instead of sound alarm? Terrified, Garrett said honestly. Certain I was making the worst mistake of my life. He paused. Also certain it was the only choice I could live with. Yes. Cora touched the stone at her throat. Father, give me this. Say memory gives strength. Cora always think it means strength to honor past, to do what father did. And now Cora think maybe it means something different. Maybe father's memory gives strength to choose different, to choose better, to choose what father could not choose. She looked at the letter. Father trust human, human betray, father die. And Cora think never trust, never try, never hope. But you not betray, Isolde not betray. And Cora realized father's mistake was not trust. Father's mistake was trust, wrong person. Maybe, she looked at Garrett, maybe if father meet you instead, father still alive. Clan still alive. Everything different. Garrett's eyes were shining. You can't know that. No, cannot know, can only choose. She stood, picking up the letter. Cora choose believe father right. Choose believe bridge possible. Choose believe stupid humans and stupid orcs together can make something that is not war. She held out the letter. Will you help me send this? Garrett stood. Took the letter carefully. You know this might not work. Your brother might not understand. My people might find out. We could both end up dead or worse. Yes, Cora smiled. That awkward, tusked smile that was becoming easier each time. But we could also end up alive, building something new, being first ones stupid enough to try on. First ones stupid enough, Garrett echoed, then laughed, a real laugh, not bitter, not afraid, just honest. Isolde was right. Being stupid might be the bravest thing we can do. Your sister is wise, Cora said. Also crazy, but wise. They stood together at the cave entrance, watching the sun move lower toward evening. Two people who had chosen each other over everything they'd been taught, everything they'd been raised to believe. It wasn't a happily ever after. It was just a moment, a choice, a letter waiting to be sent. But sometimes that's all you need to change a world. One stupid, brave, impossible choice at a time. The messenger crow returned 3 weeks later. Cora knew before she opened the tube what it would say, could feel it in the weight of the silence that followed the bird's arrival, in the way it circled twice before landing. Like even the crow understood the gravity of what it carried. She sat alone in the cave. Garrett and Isolde wouldn't arrive for another hour. Good. This conversation, whatever it brought, needed to happen between her and her brother first. The seal was different this time. Not wax, but blood, dried and dark. The traditional bloodstone mark for messages of utmost importance. Cora's hands trembled as she broke it. Cora, brother has read your words many times. Each reading brings different feeling. Anger, pride, fear, understanding. Brother wants to rage, wants to command, wants to drag little sister home by her tusks and make her remember duty. But brother remembers something and remembers father before he died. Father said, Dravik, if I fall, protect your sister, not her body, her spirit. Let her be what she needs to be, even if you do not understand. Brother did not understand then, does not fully understand now. But brother is coming, not to bring you home, to see for himself what you have chosen, to meet these humans who make you believe bridges are possible. If they are worthy, brother will know. If they betray, brother will kill them and bring you home in chains if necessary. Brother arrives at next full moon. Be ready. Dravik. Cora read it 3 times. Each time her heart beat faster, harder, threatening to crack her ribs from the inside. He was coming. Her brother, her chief, the last piece of her old life walking directly into her new one. And she had no idea if this would be a reunion or a war. He's coming, Cora said when Garrett arrived that afternoon. She handed him the letter, watched his face change as he read. Fear, determination, something else that looked almost like relief. Good, Garrett said. Cora stared at him. Good brother might kill you, might kill Isolde, might drag Cora back to mountains in chains. He might, Garrett agreed, but he's also giving us a chance. He could have just shown up, could have brought warriors, could have made this a fight from the beginning. He looked at the letter again. Instead, he's giving us the opportunity to show him what we've built, to prove that this isn't betrayal, it's evolution. You have too much faith in words, Cora said. But even as she spoke, she felt something shift in her chest. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. Maybe, Garrett said, but so did your father. And you're here because of him, because he believed that words could matter more than weapons. That understanding could be stronger than hate. He was right. Cora hated that he was right, but he was. When is the full moon? Garrett asked. Cora looked at the sky, calculating. 5 days. Then we have 5 days to prepare, to make sure that when your brother arrives, he sees something worth preserving instead of something worth destroying. They spent those 5 days transforming the cave. Not physically. The space remained the same. Small, hidden, simple. But they filled it with evidence of what they'd built. Books stacked carefully in the corner showing Cora's progress with common tongue. Herb bundles hanging from the ceiling demonstrating the medicine knowledge she'd been sharing. A small altar near the entrance where Cora had placed her father's Karak stone alongside 3 others. What are these? Isolde asked, touching the new stones gently. Memory stones, Cora said. In Bloodstone tradition, when someone dies, we take stone from their burial place. Keep it. Remember. She pointed to each one. This one for Elder Mara. She teach Cora about Dream Willow. This one for young Grok. He died protecting children during attack. This one for Father's father. He start healer tradition in clan. You're building a shrine, Isolde said softly. A place to remember. Yes, but also a place to teach, to show what was lost. What we trying to prevent from happening again. Garrett knelt beside the altar. May I add something? Cora nodded. He pulled a small object from his pocket. A button, worn brass, military issue. This was from the uniform of the orc who died at Crow's Ridge. The one who called for his mother. I went back the next day, found it in the mud, kept it. I don't know why. Maybe because... He trailed off. Because you needed remember too, Cora finished. Needed remember that he was person, not just enemy. Yes, Cora took the button, placed it carefully beside her father's stone. He has place here. His memory has place. All memories of those lost to war have place. They sat together in silence, 3 people building something new from pieces of the past. The full moon rose on a night so clear you could see every star. Cora waited at the cave entrance. Garrett and Isolde stood slightly behind her, close enough to support, far enough to show this was Cora's moment, Cora's choice. She heard him before she saw him. Drevik moved through the forest like an earthquake wearing skin, heavy, powerful, inevitable. Then he was there, stepping into the moonlight. Cora's breath caught. She'd forgotten how big he was, how the scars on his arms told stories of battles survived, how his eyes, the same gold as hers, could look both fierce and infinitely sad at the same time. Little sister, he said, speaking Orcish. Big brother, she replied, also in Orcish. They stared at each other across 10 feet of distance that felt like miles. Then Dravik's eyes moved past her, to Garrett, to Isolde, assessing, measuring, deciding if they were threats or something else. These are the humans who make you forget your people, he said, still in Orcish, making sure they couldn't understand. No, Cora said, switching to common tongue deliberately. These are humans who help me remember what Father taught, before hate made us forget. Dravik's jaw tightened, but he followed her lead, switched languages. Father taught duty, taught honor, taught that clan comes before self. Father taught that healing matters more than hurting, Cora countered, that understanding matters more than victory, that memory gives strength not to repeat past but to build different future. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You told me to survive. I survived. You told me to honor dead. I honor them by trying what Father tried, by refusing to let his dream die just because he did. Drevik was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed, not cruel, not mocking, but genuinely surprised. You sound like him, like Father when he argued with chiefs, same fire, same stupid hope. Brother calls Cora stupid. Cora thinks brother is right, but brother also thinks, Drevik continued, his expression sobering, that maybe stupid is only way anything it ever changes. He turned to Garrett. studied him with the intensity of someone who had spent a lifetime reading people in combat, deciding in split seconds whether they would fight or run, kill or surrender. You are the one who guarded her, Drivik said. Not a question, a statement. Yes, Garrett said simply. Why? Because she was crying, and I thought, Garrett paused, choosing his words carefully. I thought maybe monsters don't cry. Maybe we've been wrong about what makes someone a monster. Druvik's eyes narrowed. Pretty words, easy words. Brother wants to know, will you stand by these words when harder? When other soldiers find out? When you face court-martial for treason? I already lied to my patrol to protect her, Garrett said. Already risked everything by coming here. Already made my choice. He met Dravik's gaze directly. The question isn't whether I'll stand by my words. The question is whether you'll give us a chance to prove that your father's dream wasn't foolish, just early. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Dravik did something that shocked everyone. He smiled. Dravik has been watching for 5 weeks, since Messenger Crow returned with Sister's letter, following from distance, making sure humans not betraying, not planning trap. Cora's world tilted. 5 weeks. You've been here 5 weeks. Yes, brother needs to know if sister is safe, if sister has truly found something worth choosing over clan, or if sister is just, he gestured vaguely, confused, hurt, making choices from pain instead of wisdom. And what did you see? Cora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dravik looked at the three of them, at the cave behind them, at the small shrine visible through the entrance. Brother saw sister learning, growing, becoming something father would recognize. Not warrior, not killer, but healer, peacemaker, builder of bridges father tried to build. He turned to Garrett and Isolde. Brother saw humans who treat sister with respect, who learn from her, who protect her not because they fear her strength, but because they value her spirit. He sat down heavily, making the ground shake. Brother saw something impossible, and brother thinks maybe impossible is only impossible until someone is brave enough to try. Relief flooded through Cora so intensely she nearly collapsed. Then you approve? No, Drevik said flatly. Brother thinks this is dangerous. Thinks sister is risking everything for dream that might fail. Thinks humans cannot be trusted. Before Cora could respond, he continued. But brother also remembers father dying in his arms. Father's last words, do not let hate win. Do not let them make us into what they fear. Brother has carried those words for 10 years, never understood them. Until now. He reached into his pack, pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth, handed it to Cora. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a stone, similar to her karak, but larger, streaked with silver instead of gold. Father's second stone, Drevik said quietly, the one he kept in his private chambers, the one mother gave him when they bonded. Brother has carried it since father died, waiting for right moment to pass it on. Tears streamed down Cora's face. Dravik? Sister asked if brother approves. Brother says brother is not ready to approve, but brother is ready to watch, to wait, to see if dream can become real. He stood. And if dream fails, if humans betray, brother will be here, to protect, to avenge, to bring sister home. That's all I ask, Cora said. No. Drivik shook his head. Sister asks for more. Sister asks brother to hope. And that, he touched his chest, that is harder than fighting, harder than killing, harder than anything brother has ever done. They didn't hear the attackers until it was too late. 6 humans, moving in coordinated silence. Professional, military, not regular patrol, something else, something worse. Cora saw them first, caught movement in her peripheral vision, shouted warning in both languages simultaneously. Ambush, run. But there was nowhere to run. They emerged from the trees like shadows gaining substance. Swords drawn, faces covered, no identifying marks, no unit insignias. Found the traitor, one of them said, voice muffled behind cloth. And a bonus, 2 orcs instead of 1. Garrett's sword was out instantly. Stand down, that's an order. You have no authority here, Thorn. Not anymore. Not after you chose monsters over your own kind. They attacked. Garrett met the first one, blades clashing in the moonlight. Isolde scrambled backward, reaching for the knife at her belt. Small, inadequate, but something. Drevik roared. The sound shook the forest. He moved with speed that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size, grabbed one attacker by the throat, threw him into a tree hard enough to crack wood. But there were too many, too coordinated, too trained. Cora saw it happening as if time had slowed. One of the attackers breaking past Dravik's defense, sword raised, coming down toward her brother's back. The killing blow. She moved without thinking, threw herself forward, bone knife extended, deflected the sword just enough, just barely. The blade meant for Dravik's spine caught his shoulder instead. Deep, arterial, blood sprayed black in the moonlight. No! Cora's scream tore from somewhere primal, somewhere beyond language. Dravik stumbled, fell to one knee, his left arm hanging useless. Blood pouring too fast, too much. The attackers pressed forward, smelling victory. Then a voice cut through the K. "Stand down, that's an order." Captain Aldrich Rowan emerged from the tree line, uniform disheveled, sword drawn, expression carved from stone. "Captain," one of the attackers faltered. "Sir, we're following orders, eliminating the security threat." "You're following someone's orders," Rowan said coldly, "but not mine, and not the king's. Now drop your weapons before I have you all arrested for assault on a superior officer." The attackers hesitated, looked at each other, calculating odds. "Do it now," Rowan commanded, "or I swear by every god listening I will personally ensure you hang for treason." One by one they lowered their weapons. Rowan stepped forward, looked at Garrett, at Isolde, at the two orcs, one bleeding out on the ground. His face gave away nothing. "Secure them," he said to Garrett. "Tie them. We'll sort this out back at camp." Then he knelt beside Dravik, looked at the wound, looked at Cora. "Can you save him?" he asked quietly. Cora was already moving, hands pressing against the wound, mind cataloging what she needed. Silverleaf, bloodroot, dream willow, thread for stitching, hands that didn't shake even though her world was ending. "Yes," she said, "but not here. Need cave, need supplies, need time." "Then get him inside," Rowan said. He stood, addressed his voice to Garrett. "You have 1 hour, fix him. Then we're going to have a very long conversation about what exactly has been happening in this forest." Deo. Cora worked with a focus that transcended thought. Her hands moved through motions her father had taught her, cleaning the wound, packing it with silverleaf paste, stitching layers, muscle first, then tissue, then skin, each movement precise, practiced, perfect. Dravik was unconscious. Good. Pain would have made this harder. Garrett held the lamp. Isolde boiled water. Rowan stood at the cave entrance, watching the bound soldiers outside. "Why you help?" Cora asked Rowan as she worked, not looking up, not breaking rhythm. "Because," Rowan said slowly, 6 years ago, a young soldier came back from his first battle and threw up behind a supply wagon. He thought no one noticed. But I did." He paused. "I watched him struggle, watched him try to reconcile what he'd been taught with what he'd seen, watched him become a good soldier while keeping his humanity intact. That's rare, rare enough to matter." "So you follow him," Cora said. "Make sure he's safe." "I followed him. Found this place 3 weeks ago. Saw what you were building. And I thought," Rowan's voice roughened, "I thought maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still something worth fighting for besides territory and revenge." Cora finished the last stitch, sat back. Her hands were covered in Dravik's blood, dark green, almost black. "Brother will live," she said. "But we'll be weak. We'll need time to heal." "He'll have it," Rowan said. "I'll make sure of it." "Why boysfam?" This time it was Garrett asking. "Sir, with all respect, why risk your career for us? Why not just report what you found?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old regrets. "Because 20 years ago I had a friend, an orc named Gorak. We met during a prisoner exchange. Found out we both loved chess. Started playing, talking, learning. He looked at the shrine with his collection of stones. For 2 years we met in secret, built a friendship that shouldn't have been possible. Then someone found out. My commanding officer gave me a choice, turn him in or face court-martial for treason. What you choose, Cora asked, though she already knew. I turned him in. He was executed 3 days later, and I've spent 20 years hating myself for being too much of a coward to choose differently. Rowan met Cora's eyes. So when I found you three building the same dream Gorak and I shared, I made a different choice. The choice I should have made the first time. Dawn came slowly. The bound soldiers had been taken away by Rowan's most trusted men, to be questioned, to face justice for acting without proper authority. Drevik woke just as the sun broke the horizon. His eyes found Cora immediately. "Little sister saved brother's life," he said in Orcish, his voice weak but steady. "Sister had help," Cora replied, also in Orcish, then switching to common tongue. "Sister also had choice, run away safe with Garrett or turn back to help wounded." She looked at her brother. "Sister chose heal, not just you, human and orc, because that is what father would do, what father taught." Drevik struggled to sit up. Cora helped him, supporting his weight. "Brother was wrong," he said, told Cora to survive. But brother realizes now surviving is not living. Living is choosing, choosing who you are, who you want to be. He gestured to the cave, to Garrett and Isolde and Rowan standing watch. Father tried to build bridges, failed, died. Brother thought Dream died with him. But looking at sister brother understands Dream did not die. Dream just waited for someone brave enough, stupid enough, young enough to believe it possible. "What you saying?" Cora asked. Brother saying sister not coming back to clan. But maybe clan comes to sister. Maybe Dravik brings young ones, orphans, survivors, brings them here to learn, to see that there is different way. Cora's breath caught. You would do that risk that... Sister risked everything for Dream. Brother can risk something too. He touched the wound at his shoulder, and sister proved last night that healing is not weakness, that choosing to save instead of kill is not betrayal of clan, is honoring clan, honoring father. He looked at Garrett. "Human soldier, you guarded sister when should kill. You learned when should fear. You stood when should run. Dravik was ready to hate you, but cannot hate someone who sees sister as person, not monster." "I never saw her as a monster," Garrett said. "Just someone who needed help, same as any of us." "That is what makes difference," Drevik said. "That is what father tried to teach, what brother finally understands." Over the next week, something impossible began to take shape. Cora stayed at the cave, but now others came. First, 2 young orcs, orphans from Dravik's camp, scared, uncertain, but curious. They watched from the tree line for 3 days before Cora coaxed them closer. Then a human, a soldier who had lost his son at Crow's Ridge. He came to the shrine, stood there for an hour, silent, finally spoke. "My boy called for me when he died. Called for me and I wasn't there. If someone could have been there for him the way you were there for that orc boy." He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. More came, slowly, carefully. People who were tired of war, tired of hate, tired of losing everyone they loved to a conflict no one could remember starting. The cave wasn't big enough, so they expanded, built simple shelters around it, created a space that belonged to neither side and somehow belonged to both. They called it Stone Circle. Because at the center, Cora's shrine had grown. Stones from human dead, stones from orc dead, all mixed together, all remembered together, a garden of memories that refused to let hate be the final word. Isolde became the keeper of stories, writing down names, histories, the lives behind each stone. Garrett became the guardian, not with violence, but with presence, with the quiet authority of someone who had chosen peace and would defend that choice with everything he had. Captain Rowan visited once a week, bringing supplies, news, making sure the fragile peace they'd built with Ramo wasn't crushed before it could grow. And Dravik brought more young ones, taught them that strength wasn't just in fighting, that honor could be found in healing, in learning, in choosing differently than their parents had chosen. 3 months after the attack, Cora stood at the entrance to Stone Circle, watching the sunset. A human mother and an orc mother sat together near the shrine, Both had lost children in the same battle. Both were crying, but this time they cried together, holding hands across the space where their children had killed each other. Cora felt Garrett's presence behind her. He didn't speak, just stood, sharing the moment. "You think Father would be proud?" Cora asked quietly. "I think your father would be amazed," Garrett replied, "and maybe a little smug that he was right all along." Cora laughed. The sound still surprised her sometimes. How laughter could exist in the same world as grief. "What we built here," she said, "it is not big, not strong, not enough to end war." "No," Garrett agreed, "but it's a start, and every big thing starts small." Cora touched the Carrack stone at her throat, felt its familiar weight, remembered her father's words, "Memory gives strength." She understood now, finally, what he'd meant. Not strength to repeat the past, but strength to imagine a different future. To choose the hard path, the unlikely path, the path that required believing in something better, even when everything suggested it was impossible. "Father," she whispered to the stone, to the memory it carried. "You died believing dream failed, but you planted seed, tiny seed, in Cora's heart, in all hearts that still believed peace was possible." She looked at Stone Circle, at the impossible collection of humans and orcs learning to exist in the same space, learning to see each other, learning to remember together instead of hating apart. "What is growing, Father?" Slowly, carefully, but growing. A young orc child ran past, chasing a human child, both laughing, both oblivious to the miracle they represented. "Cora is daughter of Zorgath the Peacemaker," she said, speaking to the wind, to the stars, to whatever gods might be listening. "Cora is healer of Stone Circle. Cora is builder of bridges," Father started. She pulled the stone from her throat, walked to the shrine, placed it carefully in the center, where it caught the last light of day, black and gold and silver stones together, past and present and future. "This is not ending, Father. This is beginning, your beginning, finally alive." Behind her, more people arrived, tired, wounded, seeking, some human, some orc, and all carrying the weight of a war they were tired of fighting. And at Stone Circle, they found something they'd forgotten how to hope for. A place where memory gave strength not to repeat history, but to rewrite it. Where enemies could become teachers, teachers could become friends, and friends could become the foundation of something that had never existed before. A future built not on victory, but on understanding. Not on conquest, but on choice. Not on whose side won, but on the simple radical belief that there didn't have to be sides at all. Cora turned back to the circle, to her people, to the impossible family she'd built from the ruins of everything she'd lost. "Come," she said, speaking to everyone and no one. "Evening meal ready. Come eat, come rest, come remember that you are more than soldiers, more than enemies." She smiled, that awkward, beautiful smile that had become easier with practice. "Come be human. Come be orc. Come be people who choose different." And they came, one by one, step by step, choice by choice, building a world where the last daughter of Bloodstone wasn't last at all. She was first. First of a new way. First of a new hope. First of the ones brave enough, stupid enough, broken enough to believe that peace wasn't weakness. It was the hardest strength of all. Years later, when the war finally ended, historians would argue about what caused it. Some said it was economic pressure. Others claimed military exhaustion. A few credited political treaties. But those who knew really knew would point to a small clearing in the forest, to a circle of stones carrying memories of the dead, to a place where a human soldier once chose to guard instead of kill, where an orc healer chose to build instead of burn. They called it Stone Circle, but its real name, whispered in both languages, was simpler: hope. And hope once planted is remarkably hard to kill. Even when the world tries its absolute hard,